you?
I'm good. So I noticed you had a lot of thoughts on feminism. I'm a feminist, but
Totally
I was
fine.
just wondering, how do you differentiate between the extremism that exists in feminism, as it does across, multiple different ideologies, but how do you differentiate between the extremism and how, feminists like me think? I don't hate men.
It's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. It's a great, great question. So what you have to realize about the left when you talk about extremism is they hack words that once had real meaning, and they take them for their own nefarious goals, right? So they'll say racism, and you'll go, oh my God, no, really, racism used to exist, but now it means organizing your pantry. That's obviously not racism. That's completely ridiculous. You see something like feminism, and once upon a time, women were fighting for the right to vote. Well, now we have that. We have equal footing, and now they're using those terms. They're hiding behind the shield of feminism, and they're doing actually horrible things in society. And I blame feminists for almost every ill that we have right now, because they've encouraged people not to act as a woman, and they bash men all the time. And I think that they have contributed the most to the breakdown of family in terms of an ideology. Now, for you,
answer my question.
No, I'm getting there.
Okay.
Now, for you, you're like, okay, but I actually am somebody that just believes in equality, that there should be equality between the sexes, right?
I think it's more culturally and socially, not necessarily in the realm of legality.
Sure, so I'm going to ask you, what is it socially? So you can call yourself something, right? That means that there's some fight that you have. What is it socially that you and I have as women that we don't have that men do? Why is there a need for you to be a feminist?
I think as women, we are undervalued when it comes to our intelligence. I think people, especially for me, as a woman who, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Go ahead, let her talk.
For me, as a woman, I feel like a lot of people look at me and think I'm superficial. They think I'm vapid. They don't necessarily see that I could be intelligent, that I could speak for myself. They tend to automatically...
Guys, don't be rude. Go ahead.
I tend to get belittled a lot, and that comes from men, not necessarily women, right?
So you're saying in your personal capacity, men are belittling you, right? But when you talk about affecting actually a social change, this might be your personal experience, but does that mean that all women are going through this, or that all women are experiencing this belittlement by men?
And see, I understand that, but I think also when I listen to you speak, and you speak on why you don't like feminism, I hear a lot of anecdotal work, and I hear a lot of personal experience, like your experience in that one class that you had, whereas I've had 5, 6 classes in my gender studies courses, and I've never experienced anything
that's totally
like that.
That's
ever.
totally fine.
You know
Guys,
what I mean?
They're
So
just
I just don't
laughing
feel like it's fair to
studies.
take personal
it's totally
experience
fine. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm actually talking about the real world consequences of the dangerous ideology telling women that they have to take their clothes off, that they should be on TikTok. I'm talking about real world consequences.
Yeah,
I'm talking about literally the fact that women are no longer, like, they're by and large all climbing the corporate ladder, and that children are being ceded over to the state. So I was giving you an anecdotal example of what happened in my feminist class, but the repercussions of that are seen everywhere. What I am saying is that what I'm offering to you is not to feel like you have to give yourself an ism, right? Don't feel like you have to put yourself in a box. Don't feel like you have to put yourself into some weird social constructs. I think that what you'll find with time is that it constrains you unnecessarily. I don't have a problem with the fact if you want to identify as a feminist and you think that there is some fight that needs to be ended. I don't personally think that that's...
Is conservatism not a box any more than feminism is?
Well, saying that I have conservative principles, feminism is not being a conservative or being a liberal, right? You're talking about an ideology, right? A system you think
I would assume conservatism is also an ideology as well, is it not?
Sure. Conservatism is an ideology. These are the things that we believe. You could say that everything is an ideology. What I'm saying to you is that I would not necessarily paint yourself into a corner. You don't seem to me like you have any issues speaking up. You don't seem to me like you feel like you're constrained in any way. You're standing up here today. I would offer to you that there's never been a more remarkable time to be a woman in this society. By every statistic, we are doing better than men. That's a fact, right? Men have a higher, we are graduating at a higher rate than men. Men have higher suicide rates. That's why I said to you, despite how you're feeling, what are the real world implications that suggest to you that you are somehow beneath men? You might have a personal experience where a man...
we can talk about sexual assault everywhere, in the military, in the home.
So are these the things that you're fighting to end sexual assault?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, great. You don't have to be a feminist to fight to end sexual assault.
You don't have to be,
men and women.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't believe you have to
It's a great cause.
But it's,
Men
of course, a part
and
of the
women go
ideology.
through that. I just said to him, one of the biggest things that I give to every year is for human sex trafficking. It doesn't require to be a feminist. Now, you seem really committed to it. I've said to you since the very beginning, if you want to be a feminist girl, put it on a t-shirt, wear it, put a hashtag. I'm just telling you, don't unnecessarily put yourself into a corner, and to recognize that it has never been a greater time. I would offer it is a way better time in this society to be a woman.
Oh my gosh, I literally love this outfit because, no, it's okay. I was just saying I love your outfit because literally my son right now loves Peter Pan, and I just bought him the hook. So this is incredible. I love that. Go ahead.
All right, so can you mateys hear me?
Pardon?
Can you mateys hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so my question for you was, I believe in high school you had a racial discrimination lawsuit, and you received $50,000 from your school as a result of this. And you've recently claimed that, like, racism isn't, like, such a big deal. So are you interested in perhaps giving that money back, or, like, what's the plan there?
So you're not educated about my life, and I'm very happy to educate you. And by the way, the best way to get educated about my life is to purchase my book, where I talked about this in chapter 2. I do just want to tell you that, because it's remarkable to me that I wrote about this extensively in my book, and people always think this is a gotcha. They're like, gotcha, this happened to you in high school. Yeah, it's actually the reason I am conservative, is because of this thing that happened to me in high school, which was a race incident that involved a kid that was my best friend, and he... You know, I got a boyfriend, that's the truth, and stopped hanging out with all my friends, as high school girls do. Totally innocent, normal situation. And one night, he obviously had too much to drink and got 3 people who I had never heard of or met to leave really horrific racist messages. Now, I've never once said that racism doesn't exist. That's something that was created by The Root, and people keep saying I've said it. Actually, I say the exact opposite. Racism will always exist as long as human beings exist, as human beings are ignorant, right? And that's when you meet somebody that's actually racist, they're just ignorant. It's the people that I'm like, I could never even be offended by you being a racist because I'm going to be so far ahead of you in life. It's ridiculous, right? But going back to the story, this kid used to be my friend. He was upset that I stopped hanging out with him. And unfortunately, one of the people that left these messages happened to be the governor of Connecticut's son. So this turned overnight into a political, sensational story. It's my first introduction to the media, my first introduction to the NAACP, who showed up at the front of my school, had never talked to me, but tried to raise money off of real hurt that I was going through. Nobody tried to sit down and actually resolve the situation. Was the kid a racist? Well, obviously not, because we were best friends for years, right? Was he hurt? Yes. Did he say racist things? Yes. That situation, and by the way, the money refund that you're talking about was because while this was a huge news cameras outside event, homeschooled. I had to stay home and homeschool and get private tutoring while this was going on until the FBI could trace these phone calls. So if you're stepping to the plate to tell me that that's not right, that, you know, you got reimbursed for being out of school, you're making not a very valid point, I don't think. But the moral of what my lesson was that people are raising money. What I learned from it was people are literally raising money off of racism. The NAACP never wants racism to go away, okay? They want, because they can fund on finding it everywhere, and they didn't care about the fact that I was a young teenager. I learned a lesson about the media. It's all about selling headlines and selling your story and your point of view, and nobody looked at me or those boys, for matter. One of them was 12 and was being called a racist, and it impacted the rest of that kid's life. Like, I mean, these kids were suicidal, on drugs, plenty of arrests after it, because that's how traumatic it was to have adults rush, and instead of adulting, labeling kids for the rest of their lives without trying to get to the root of the situation. So I appreciate the Captain Hook heroic attempt to catch me at my own game. But I am very proud of what I went through in high school, and I thank God for it, because it woke me up to a lot of the things that we're facing today in our society. And thank you so much for your question.
Hi.
Hi. I had an honest question for you, because I feel like your grandfather's story is very inspiring. But you say that people complain so much. But if people didn't complain in those days and fight for people's rights and fight for feminism, which is just equality for women, then you wouldn't be on the stage today, and I wouldn't be here asking you this question. And so if people aren't complaining, as you say, and fighting for rights, then nothing would happen. So how can you reconcile these differences?
Yeah, so first I want to say I understand your sentiment, because when I was your age, I thought the same thing, that feminism is just about equality. One of the brilliant things that the left does is they repackage words. It's clearly not feminism anymore. It's designed to actually rip apart women and men, to make women paranoid about men all the time, and every industry is controlled by a man, and to make being on your own, I want to do all by myself, aspirational, right? It's about all my single ladies, who needs a man. So just because you're using the word feminism, it doesn't mean that it is feminism, right? And as best evidenced by the fact that they just keep using it when obviously we are on equal footing with men, and unless you can tell me what you're not allowed to do as a woman in society that men are allowed to do, right? That would be like a systemic problem that we would need to fix. And so also I want to just remind you that I said earlier that you don't know true history, and when you wake up to the evils of feminism, they were fixated on breaking up the family. They liked death, right? They were creating a cult of death and destruction everywhere, all across the world. And just to be clear, the earliest iteration of a feminist that you're talking about that you deem to be heroic would be Margaret Sanger. That's a first wave feminist, and she hated me, so I feel nothing towards those feminists. And when I look around and I see women who are now crying on TikTok, and they don't understand, they did everything they were supposed to do, and I actually empathize and sympathize with them, and then suddenly they're in the world and they're making $25,000 a year, and they can't do bad all by themselves, single ladies, and actually their bodies start coming online, and their biology starts coming online, and they actually want to get married and have children, and they're realizing that they've stepped into a design that they were promised was going to be, as you hear, it's just going to be great, it's all going to be amazing, and it actually isn't that amazing. I don't know why. What are we even fighting anymore? Men holding doors? That's the new feminist cause? Like, no, equality means don't hold the door. No, I like when men pay for my meals. Love when my husband pays for my meals when we're recording. I like having the door held for me. In a perfect world, our society was so much better when women were involved every single day with their children before we handed them over to the Department of Education. And so I do not see feminism as having accomplished anything in our society. I actually think it was a nightmare that is being repackaged in our textbooks. So I would implore you to just do a little more research and start with Emma Goldman.
What you guys are living through is such a unique time in this country. I would say it's an awful time to be a college student. Like when I was a university student, I was a liberal. My best friend in the entire world was a conservative. Her family was conservative. I used to go out for dinners with them. Like every weekend, we'd drive out to Massachusetts because I went to school in Rhode Island, and I'd have dinners, and I would debate her dad, who was a conservative, and I'd say all the liberal things, and how could you not think that, you know, immigrants deserve a life, whatever it was, and it was all cool. There was no name calling. There was no you're a this, you're a that. So I just want you guys to be aware of that, knowing that the experience that you guys are having in classrooms has been radically transformed since the time that I went to school. So I graduated high school in 2007, not that long ago. I'm not exactly a dinosaur, but college campuses have completely shifted. The majors that you have were not available. I was shocked going through the catalog and seeing, wow, they're just making stuff up. They're having fun. I feel like they are having fun deciding what programs to allow students to just burn their cash on. I think that's an accurate way to say it. I mean, why else would you go to school and major in something like gender studies? And I'm not saying that to discount the fact that somebody might be interested in the subject. I'm just saying, realistically, have you paused and considered, if you go to university for 4 years and you accrue debt? I'm assuming a lot of people here took out student loans. Like I took out student loans. When I was in school, it was about $35,000 a year out of state. So I'm just thinking, what kind of a person would be encouraged to go to university, to spend that kind of money, to potentially come out of university with 6 figures or close to 6 figures of debt like I had, and not really realize that there's not really a job that you can take with that sort of a major. What is the job? What is the job? You say, I've studied, I got all A's, amazing, I did so great, you know, I studied gender studies. What do you do with that degree when you go out into the real world? Seriously. I'll ask you guys a question. When, by a show of hands, who has ever been in a situation when they've been like, I really need a gender studies major here to sort this out? No one. No one ever. It's a complete and utter scam. That's what you are. You are actually actively being scammed, and you're not going to realize it until you get out into the real world and you find that actually the only job that's going to be available for somebody that takes up that sort of a major is to go right back into the ecosystem. A professor, right? A professor and teaching the same subject that earned Juno money to other students. I actually think that people should be outraged by that. And by the way, people are outraged by that. What ends up happening is a lot of these students go into the real world, they find that they can't take a job, and they can't find a job, they can't earn any money because they're not actually creating a meaningful job. Like, they're not actually doing something that people need, right? And they learn very quickly what the free market suddenly means. Maybe the economics courses that they weren't taking, suddenly they recognize it when they get into the real world, and they go, boom, now I have all this debt, I can't get a job, and I'm angry. And they're not quite sure who they should be angry at, right? And then they look at somebody like somebody that they went to high school with who didn't go to university, and instead that kid who was basically trained to believe that he was going to be a loser, because we all feel that pressure. I definitely felt that pressure. That's why I signed up for so many ridiculous student loans to go to university. Go, go, go. Even if you don't know what you want to do, sign up and just go. You'll figure it out when you get there. You got your guidance counselor telling you that, the entire society is sort of blaring to you that if you don't go to college, then you are a failure. And then there's that one kid that didn't listen to that, and maybe he went to trade school, right? And that kid has, therefore, no debt. He immediately started working. Maybe he fixes, I don't know, air conditionings. And now he's the person. And let me tell you something. If you live in a place like I live in Tennessee, you will pay any amount of money if your AC goes out in July or August in any of those hot months. Suddenly that guy's making six figures, he's got no debt, and then you weigh that against the people who are convinced that they're getting the education that they're supposed to be so much better than this person who have massive amounts of debt. It's a total flip-flop, and it's a scam.
My question for you is, I wanted to say, my name is Khalif, and I agree with your comments about a lot of the struggles that Black Americans do face in the country is due to the breakdown of the Black family following the passing of the Civil Rights Act, and the promotion of welfare, specifically toward Black mothers and incentivizing them to not have their fathers in the home. I would say to you, as a Black American yourself who has made a platform despite the country and the actions in our past and what's currently going on, what would you say is, well, one, I would know, how do you feel like you were able to do so? But then also, what would be your recommendation to me, another Black American or any other one, to reverse the effects of the breakdown of the Black family?
Great question. So I think a couple of things that worked in my favor. I'm my granddaddy's girl, for better or worse. I mean, my granddad was stubborn as the day was long. I am stubborn. Like I just saying to her, I've always been this way. Even when I was a liberal, even when I had the wrong ideas, I just demanded the right to be myself, right? I demanded the right to be myself and not be punished for being myself, right? Least of all if I wasn't doing anything that was wrong. And that's kind of what's happened. And so the first thing that I would say is, if you want to get ahead as a Black American, stop allowing the media to allow you to see yourself as a Black American. Start seeing yourself as an American, right? Just an American, full stop. The second thing that I would say is that when you start doing that, the relationships that you are able to build, because part of them corroding everybody's mind is to make them perceive other people as the enemy. It destroys relationships, right? And the relationships that you are able to build, which is very much what I did in my life, just by refusing the narrative, it became a superpower. It really became a superpower. I was surrounded with friends that inspired me, people that wanted to work hard and didn't want to have any of the political correctness nonsense in the middle. Like, what can we build? How can we build? The world is at your fingertips. If you are a Black American breathing safe, if you're an American breathing safe, like I said, you are the most privileged that has ever lived on the face of the planet. That's the truth. And as soon as you remove the barriers that have been put up in your own minds, you'll be able to see it for the first time. Thank you so much. If you are living and breathing in America right now, you are a part of a generation that is the most spoiled and privileged that has ever lived in the face of the planet in all of human history. And what happens when you are actually remarkably privileged is that you start looking to complain, right? It's like when life gets really good is when you start complaining about really small things. Unimaginable battles that you're having today if you just have a conversation with your grandparents, right? And what they had to face growing up. That's always my litmus test when people ask me, oh my gosh, Candace, how do you deal with all the attacks, the media, people tweeting at you and saying mean stuff? I'm like, man, imagine if I had to say to my grandfather that the thing that was so tough was I opened the internet and someone said something mean to me. Like, it's so ridiculous. We're ridiculous. It's just absolutely ridiculous. I can just opt out. I don't need to be on Twitter. I don't need to be on Instagram. It's like granddad was living in the segregated South when he grew up, and I'm sad about a tweet. Like, it doesn't work for me, right? It just doesn't work. And so the first thing to do is to recognize that all of us are tremendously privileged to even be having these debates, these abnormal debates that I genuinely believe sometimes are being driven out of a boredom. I think it's natural for every generation to want to believe that they have triumphed something, right? Like, you're just sort of like, we are the generation that ended segregation. Yay, go 1960s. We are of a generation that protested and put an end to the Vietnam War. Yay, go 1970s. Then you get to now, and we're kind of doing okay, right? Like, we're like, things are looking pretty good. And so people just need to complain about things, and that's when you get into like, well, what if I feel like I was born a fish, and there's no restaurants for fish, and there's no bathrooms for fish? I need a sign that says that fish can go here, right? Or else, how else will I feel like I'm welcome into this unique stall? And that's where we're at. So we should stop taking ourselves seriously as like a human race. That's like my general perspective on everything that's going on. And it's interesting also to consider psychology, because I was just tweeting about this, because it's only until you are removed from the system, which is to say you guys are not yet outside of the system, right? We get kicked out of our parents' house, kindergarten, and then like suddenly you're in high school, you've got your friends, you get in the swing of things, and your guidance counselor's like, no, if you don't go to college, you're a failure, you're going to fail in life, right? You better sign up and take out a bunch of loans and something that you absolutely cannot afford, and you don't even understand these 3,000-page documents, especially if you're like me, and I'm a first-generation college kid. My mother didn't even graduate high school. So you imagine me signing up for loans. I had no idea what I was looking at. And you are willing to go into debt because there's this kind of pressure to just go to college, even though you have no idea what you want to do. You have no idea. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that I had to do the thing because the guidance counselors were telling you, like, you'd be a failure if you did it otherwise. And then you sort of get into college, and you don't realize it yet, but you're getting an education, you're learning some things, but you're not getting a true understanding because a lot of these universities very much exist to tell you what to think and not how to think.